episode number 194 with Clayton Fletcher. Welcome to the Heads Up Poker Podcast. This is Steve Barton, and thank you for tuning in. This week we have returning guest Clayton Fletcher. Clayton, thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I really like what you've done with the place. Getting rid of Mike. Good move.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I've never done this without Mike before. It's going to be nice to be able to get a word in.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, you can actually hear yourself think, and we can actually talk. So how the hell are you, man? You've been pretty busy. I'm impressed with what you've done. For you guys that haven't tuned in and listened, Clayton has done in 1 month with Tournament Poker Edge what they haven't been able to pull off in about a year and a half, and he's putting out a weekly episode for TPE each week, and I'm impressed, man. I like it a lot. It's fun tuning into that again, and I love what you've done with the show.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. That means a lot coming from you because I know that you work really hard on your podcast too. My history of poker podcast listening goes something like Poker Road Radio with Joe Seabach, Gavin Smith, and Joe Stapleton and Ali Najad 148 years ago. Probably the original poker podcast. And then I started listening to the 2+2 poker cast, but that one got a little bit too gossip heavy at some point for me. I don't even think they do it anymore. And then I was really, when Poker Road ended, it was devastating for me. It was the first podcast I ever really got into. I used to look forward to every single episode so much. And then the void was basically filled by Tournament Poker Edge. They used to put out a podcast every week, or at the worst every 2 weeks. I'm talking years ago, obviously, before they all started having babies and stuff. Before they all had lives, they used to do a lot of podcasting, and I would wait on pins and needles for the next episode to come out. I can't wait to hear what they talk about. I used to love especially hearing Casey's opinions on hands, because I feel like he just has a different approach to the game than most players nowadays. I don't think Casey is obsessed with trying to be balanced and GTO as he is about trying to find the most exploitative line at all times. So I always enjoyed listening to, just the back and forth, and they have good personalities. I love Derek and Mark and all those guys. So after a while, I started noticing that the podcast would kind of come and go, and more go than come. And what really did it for me was about 5 months ago, they put out an episode where they said, from now on, guys, you're going to be hearing from us a lot more. We're going to be doing a podcast every week from now on. And, and it got my hopes up.
Yes.
And then nothing for 5 months.
It just crushed them.
So I said, look, if they're not going to do one, I'm going to do it for them. And I thought, perhaps with the, the coverage that I received on the media in my main event run, it might give me a better chance of presenting myself to them as a possible host for their podcast. And I couldn't believe it, how open to the idea they were, and how easy it was to get the deal done. So we made our deal. And now what used to be my favorite podcast to listen to is the one that I'm hosting. So It's really, really fun. I'm having a blast. Good. Yeah, they were the reason that I started this show. I listened to them, and I got through all their episodes, and then I listened to them all again. And then I went to the TPE meetup, and I met Mike, and I was like, well, hell, I could do this, Yeah. So I just started. And even the motivational speech at the end, I don't know if you remember or not, but Derek threw in a motivational speech by Arnold Schwarzenegger where he listed the 7 principles of success as he sees it.
And I thought, that's a damn good idea. I'm just going to start throwing one of those in at the end of my show. And so it's really cool to see the show pick up again. And I love what you've done with it. And I think it's important to have a consistent, one coming out, whether it's one a month or one a week. I think one a week is probably the best format. But to have consistency like that, that's where you get your regular base of listeners and your super fans. And I love it, man.
Well, I mean, I was really nervous about doing it, Steve, because, my experience being in the poker media, to the extent that I've been in the poker media, which is mostly involved doing some color commentary for different WSOP final tables and a few other things like Live at the Bike. I did some hosting for them. But it's kind of limited, and other than that, it's just been like guesting on your podcast or Andrew's podcast or David Tuckman's podcast, and that's my full poker media resume in a nutshell. And in that experience, I've found that not everyone is open to having a comedian on a poker show. Not everyone thinks as funny as I think I am.
I have that same problem.
Yeah. And, I was fully prepared for a lot of backlash. This new version of the podcast sucks. This comedian guy sucks. Like, I was ready for just the trolls to come out in force. And I mean, knock on wood, dude, but they have not. Everyone's like, I'm so glad it's back. And, they like what I'm doing. They seem to be appreciative that there is a podcast. And, obviously everybody likes to hear about poker stories and poker opinions and, of course, strategy. So, and because it's a Tournament Poker Edge podcast, we're not doing cash hands. We're doing tournament hands. And, I've been talking about the tournament that's nearest and dearest to my heart, the WSOP main event. And I've been basically just going through and covering the hands that they're showing on ESPN. And I'm talking about not only the hands themselves, but just the coverage in general and kind of giving my my take on everything. And it's especially fun when some of the hands I'm talking about are hands that I played on television. So I can kind of let people know why I did certain things. And I mean, it's just been a blast. And I'm sure that we're never going to run out of content because the poker world keeps giving us more stuff to talk about. And so we're going to keep talking.
It is pretty cool. When I was up at my folks' house a week and a half ago, I think, and my mom had all the WSOP saved on DVR, so I watched them like crack. And it's neat to hear you talk about those hands, and I can remember them as I saw them, and I'm like, oh yes, I remember this hand. 10-8 versus Queen 10. Yes, I remember that one.
That's right. That's the one. And on TV, it probably looked like I lost my mind, but maybe hearing me explain why I played it that way, you might still disagree with how I played, but at least now you get into my head a little bit and know what exactly I was thinking at that time. Well, one thing I make really clear on the podcast, and really anytime I'm asked to talk about poker, is I don't consider myself the 28th best player in the world just because I got 28th place in the tournament. Yeah. I know that I will always have a lot to learn about poker, and it's kind of been the same approach that I've taken in my other career. I mean, I guess most people know I'm also a stand-up comedian. So these are two disciplines, if you will, that you'll just never master. No matter how good you get at stand-up or playing cards, you're going to have a lot to learn until you die. And that's what I love about both of them. And that's kind of my, I try to keep a certain level of humility, even though, I'm hosting a poker show. I'm not trying to pretend that I know everything about poker. I'm definitely not that guy.
I regularly embarrass myself every single week. A hand, it was ace jack offsuit under the gun, and then the following episode I had Carlos on, who basically told me that everything I explained was wrong. So,
wrong. Yeah. Cool.
Oops.
Cool.
That's how you learn. That's how you learn.
Yeah, but I think it's more relatable for people. I mean, we all love to hear, like Phil Galfond tell us the right way to play, or somebody that's just, a widely regarded as a foremost expert in this field. Tell me how to play. Like, that's something I'm interested in, but I feel like what these type of podcast offers is a different product than a subscription to Run It Up or TPE or any of the, training sites. It's more a chance to kind of take a walk in my shoes a little bit. And these shoes have been to some fun places. So
shoes have a lot of stories.
Yeah, they do. They can tell a lot of stories. So, I mean, I guess that's what I'm trying to do with it. And what I'm trying to bring to it is, just a little bit of, I guess, for lack of a better word, Steve, I'm trying to bring some personality to a game that seems to have lost a lot of its personality.
Yeah. They did that really well with the coverage this year.
I've been blown away by the work that the Poker Central crew did in producing the content, because it just I feel like they've done a good job of showing lots of hands, because obviously people that are watching poker on TV, they want to see people playing poker.
Yeah.
Not, a 20-minute diatribe about my mother's cancer or something. I understand why they used to do that years ago, because they wanted us to root for certain people to win. Like, I get all that. But they've done a really good balance of showing the hands without going into too great of strategic detail of the hands. They're just showing what happened. And they're also kind of exploring who the players are. And even though the final 36 or so didn't really include any of the like flashy big name like Negreanus or Helmuths, I think there were some really interesting people left at the end. But I just feel sorry for Carlos, because John Sin totally stole his homeless guy shtick. He's like, I'm homeless, man. I have nowhere to live. I just travel and play cards.
Yes.
I'm like, oh my God, that's Carlos. He took your stick.
Yes. That was good. I thought the same thing. I was like, did he actually steal that? I think it was patent pending. I don't know.
Yeah.
If he would have said home free, then I would have said that, okay, he stole that.
Yeah, right. They definitely should have gotten the copyright.
Yes, yeah. Well, you just got back from playing a stint down in Florida, right?
Yeah. I went down to Florida for the Isle Poker Open,
okay,
which is a really great tournament series at this place that I used to call Pompano Park Racetrack. And now it's called the Isle Casino at Pompano Park. I don't know why companies always change their name, but they do. Great place to play, really friendly dealers, good staff. And there's a lot of money in that part of the country, the southern part of Florida. There's a lot of retirees down there, or just wealthy people who live in that part of the country. And you get some action that you probably wouldn't get if you were playing in the Midwest or somewhere else. So it tends to be a really good time.
What cities are looking? Is it Pompano?
It's in Pompano Beach, which is just about 5 or 10 minutes from Fort Lauderdale. So
okay,
you're just outside of Fort Lauderdale there.
Yeah, I've yet to play poker in Florida. It's on my bucket list. I need to just make a week and a half trip out there and just go do it.
Yeah, I had a good time. It was an unprofitable trip. I whiffed. I think I played 3 or 4 events. They weren't real big buy-ins, but they were, I guess would be considered relatively high stakes, like $1,100 or $1,500, stuff like that.
Okay.
Their main event is $1,500. So
okay.
I mean, I think that's within most people's budget, even if they just want to take a shot once in a while. I had fun. I made day 2. I had a good time. I have a few hands that I'm going to talk about on my podcast.
Yes, there you go.
So I won't be talking to you about them today. You can't have the hands that I'm going to talk about on my show. I think the best thing about hosting a podcast now is just the time that I used to spend listening to you and Mike go on and on about cryptocurrency. I now take that time and do something productive.
Instead of listening to us whine about losing money.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't listened to you idiots since I got my new job. So not once.
Probably for the better.
I'm totally kidding, Steve. I'm a fan. I love you guys.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I am going out to play in New Orleans, I believe. I'm going out to Vegas here in about an hour. As soon as we get off the show, I'm going to drive to the airport and fly out there. But then I believe the following week, I'm going out to New Orleans. Have you played any poker out there?
Yeah. I actually spent the week of Halloween in New Orleans one year,
Okay.
which for those who have never done that, it's highly recommended.
Okay.
I mean, you think of New Orleans as a party city, but I've heard from people who live there that it's even more crazy of a party during Halloween than it is during Mardi Gras.
Wow.
Even though it's known for Mardi Gras, but it's also known for like voodoo, and there's a lot of spookiness kind of around New Orleans. So they really, really get into Halloween. So, I mean, I don't want to share specific details on the air, but I'll just say it's highly recommended that you spend one weekend of your life in New Orleans Halloween weekend at one time. But yeah, the action down there is usually pretty good. The people are super friendly. Just to give you what brought me there in the first place years ago, my family's from Baltimore, and they're all big football fans. And the Baltimore Ravens were going to play the Saints in New Orleans on Halloween weekend. So that's what made us decide to go down there. So like my brothers and my uncles, and we all just went down there, and we're all dressed in the Ravens gear. Full disclosure, I'm not that big of a Ravens fan, but whatever. They're all into it. So I was like just kind of going with the flow, being a Fletcher. Mm-hmm. And then we show up at the casino still wearing our out of town jerseys from the visiting enemy team. And people were so friendly and warm to us, how y'all enjoying New Orleans? Is your first time coming down here? I hope y'all have a good trip. And how was the football game? Y'all had a good time over there? Like, not like if you went to New England wearing a Jets jersey.
Yeah. You're getting popcorn and beer thrown on you.
Yeah, different vibe. And this was shortly after Hurricane Katrina, so I think people down there were just kind of generally happy to have people willing to visit their city after it had been ravaged. And so that was part of it as well. But I was really impressed with New Orleans. The action in the casino was really good, really live.
Did you play Harrah's or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew there were some other places around, but the one that was close to where we were staying was Harrah's. Okay. And it was really good. The food down there is unbelievable. Good music, great clubs. Yeah, it's definitely a fun place to visit.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, you'll have a blast. When are you going?
I'm going the weekend of my birthday, which is November 16th. So I'd have to look at a calendar.
Oh, so you're going to Vegas and then you're going to New Orleans, basically.
Yeah, this is whitepeopleproblems.com. It's
Why you got to make it racial? Carlos can go to Las Vegas and New Orleans too.
I want to read a quick email that we got from a listener. I read this from Dave. He asked a question about what recording software I was using, and I had to name about 4 of them because I didn't know which one he was talking about. He said, "Thanks for answering the question today, Steve. Had I known you'd read it on the podcast, I would have included more praise for the show. I'm impressed by the quality of guests you bring on," that's Clayton Fletcher, "who are willing to share a good deal of time instead of just a few minutes. Listening to true stories of grinders like you and Mike is much more interesting and relatable than hearing about playing nosebleed stakes where no one plays. I like the usual 2-5 and 1-3 games that I play. Keep it up, Dave." Thank you, Dave. Been a long-time listener, and thank you for the praise. I wanted to read that on the air. But yeah, so what's in store for you? What do you have coming up? You got some gigs tonight, and then any new poker tours on the horizon?
Yeah, did you answer his question though about the recording equipment?
Oh, I did. He said at the very beginning, he said it was Camtasia. So
okay.
Yeah, I told him it could be Camtasia, it could be Poker Tracker, could be Poker Indicator, and it could be the other one. Hold on, man.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm busy. I actually, we were recording this on Saturday. I had 4 shows last night, Friday. New York is an amazing city for comedy. I mean, I can do. The one night I actually did 7 performances in one night.
Wow. Yeah, how long was each one?
I mean, usually the typical spots in New York are about, on average, 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
So, maybe the early show might start at 7 o'clock and the late show might start at 1 o'clock.
Wow.
And in between, you're just doing all the spots around town. And tonight I'm actually going to be emceeing at Greenwich Village Comedy Club.
Nice.
We have 3 shows, and I'm hosting all of them. So, I mean, that's exhausting. At the end of that night, I'm just going to be ready to come home and crash.
Yeah.
Give my cat some attention. But yeah, otherwise, I am planning a trip to Las Vegas at the end of November.
Okay.
I think I'm going to be on. I think I'm going to play on Poker After Dark on Poker Go.
Oh,
We're
cool.
trying to set that up, so that's kind of inside information. Actually, hasn't been announced yet, but I'm trying to work out the details and make sure that the dates match with when I'm free out there. Yeah, and otherwise, I have a couple of dates coming up. I'm going to be headlining. If any of the listeners are anywhere near Germantown, Maryland, I'm doing a big show at the Germantown Center for the Arts on November 17th. So if anybody wants to come see me do stand-up. I did a big show in Atlantic City during the Borgata Poker Open, and it was really fun to look out and see some familiar faces that I recognized from the poker table were in my comedy audience, which is always fun when worlds collide.
That's cool. That's cool. So you'll be in Baltimore November 17th?
Yeah, actually it's Germantown. It's probably about a good hour and a half away from Baltimore, but yeah.
Okay. Well, that's cool because that's the day after my birthday. So that's neat to know that you're going to be celebrating it.
Yeah. Well, I think most of us build our lives around when your birthday is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Standard operating procedure. Steve, at some point you have to grow up and stop caring so much about your birthday.
It's the greatest day of the year. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but you're not 9.
I'm going to be 39.
Yeah. Well, do you want a tricycle for your birthday?
I want one of those, what are those plastic ones that we used to have as a kid that had 3 wheels, the little big wheels or whatever they're called.
A big wheel, yeah.
Yeah, big wheel.
Good. It's in the mail.
It's in the mail. Oh, that's awesome. Let's see. Well, I have a hand here. It's I know you're a live guy, so I went through my voice memos and I found a hand that I played at Planet Hollywood. This was during the summer. The buy-in was about $300. I can't remember if it was like $350 or $325 or what it was, but it was one of their, how they got the Goliath thing or the it's one of those. Okay, so we are under the gun. We've got 58 big blinds, or in the language of Clayton, we have an M of 39.
Thank you for converting the big blinds to M. I really appreciate it. I'm bringing M back.
You're making an impact right now.
Yeah, nice. Rest in peace, Paul McGrill.
Yes. And let's see. The blind levels are 300, 600. There's no ante. We're under the gun. So we got 35K. And we have ace 8 of hearts. Now this one, I could see just open folding this, but the table had been really passive. And I think 9, 10-handed, this is a quick, easy fold. 8-handed, I was kind of on the fence. I don't know. What are you doing with this hand with an M of 39, almost 60 big blinds and ace 8 suited?
Yeah, so I agree with your impulse that it's okay to fold. Typically, if I'm at a tough table or even an average table, I think this is a fold. A lot more can go wrong from bad position than can go right. And your stack is not such that you need to necessarily get involved with the suited ace 8. The case for getting involved with this hand is if your table is, as you say, very passive, and you also feel like your post-flop skill advantage is enough of an advantage to make up for your positional disadvantage that you're likely to have against any opponents who want to join you in the pot. So, I mean, I think all things being equal, this is a fold, but as we know, all things are not equal. And it's okay to open. It's even okay to open limp, I think.
Interesting.
If you have a passive table anyway, the real value of this hand comes from making a flush against a worse flush. And raising under the gun is likely to scare out a lot of the hands that you'd prefer to call in the unlikely event that that flush comes in.
Yeah.
So, if you look at it this way, if I open raise, like a standard raise, I'm likely to get hands like Jack 8 of hearts to, I'm sorry, you have the 8, so Jack 9 of hearts to fold. When if I limp, they might just come in and then they end up making bigger mistakes later.
Yeah.
Obviously, the case for raising is that you take the initiative in the hand, and there's a lot of value in that as well. And you might even end up stealing the blinds from under the gun, which happens. But yeah, I think if I were forced to play this hand, and you tell me the table is pretty passive anyway, I'd probably just limp in with it and see if we can catch a good flop. I also think it's totally fine to fold, and that's what I would normally do.
Okay. Yeah. Normally I'd fold, but the table has just been so damn passive that I thought it might be worth coming in here.
Yeah. So if you come in for a raise, Steve, and you get action behind you, let's say callers behind you, you're probably not going to get too many better hands to fold. I think ace 9 would probably fold, right? But ace 10 and ace jack and ace queen and ace king, they're all calling.
Yeah.
So it's okay, but you have to understand, like, when you get an ace on the flop, you're not ever going to be loving it. So
True.
depending on exactly how passive this table is, you might end up trying to, you get the flop you want, an ace high flop, and still have to play pot control because you're out of position.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not the ideal situation, but I've definitely been at tables where I'm open raising a lot of hands under the gun just because of the nature of the table. And a lot of those tables have been in $300 Planet Hollywood tournaments in July. So I get it. I definitely get it. I'm not criticizing it, but I'd still feel like a lot more can go wrong than right.
Yeah. Okay. I agree. I make it, so with ace 8 of hearts under the gun, 8-handed, I make it 3x. I raise to 1,800. Folds around to the button. He calls 1,800 and both blinds fold.
Okay, so what's his stack?
His stack is 40K, so he has us covered. The effective stack here is mine, which is 35K.
Wow. Okay, so it's a big SPR here. We're gonna
we're
it's
super
gonna be a
deep.
post flop hand for sure. All right.
Yeah, the pot right now is 4,500, and we've got what is that, 33K behind, so like 8-1 or something like that.
Yeah, it's a big SPR.
Yeah. Okay. Now the button. He just sat down. He's been down. He's been at the table for about maybe one rotation. I really don't have a read on the guy. He's a white guy. He's probably my age. He's like in his mid-30s, a little overweight. He's wearing a polo shirt. He hasn't talked much. So I don't remember him playing a hand yet, but again, I didn't put it in my notes, so I don't know if he has, but I don't really have a read on the guy. He just sat down. Okay, so with ace 8 of hearts, we go to a flop. The pot is 4,500. We got effective stacks of 33K behind. And the flop is ace of diamonds, 8 of diamonds, 10 of clubs.
Okay, we have 2 pair.
We flop 2 pair, yeah. So
Ace 10-8 with 2 diamonds.
Ace 10-8 with 2 diamonds, yep.
And you have to go first.
Action's on us.
Yeah, I mean, he either has an ace or he doesn't. Other than that, we can hope that he calls us with a draw.
Yeah.
We don't have a read on him, so I can't tell you whether Jack 9 or 7-9 hands like that are open-ended would be in his range. So you just have to kind of stereotype him, a 30-year-old typical Planet Hollywood player. I think they're usually folding those hands because you raised under the gun. Not saying they always fold him, but I think those hands are unlikely. Queen Jack is double gutted. I think a lot of Queen Jacks could be involved here. I think a lot of players would even call on the button with Queen Jack offsuit. So just trying to generalize like what kind of hands we can end up playing a pot with.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming this flop doesn't go bet folder. This isn't a very interesting hand.
Yeah, no, that would be the podcast.
I hate to I hope that's not a spoiler alert for anyone, but it's not about to go bet fold here. So yeah, I mean, I guess, you raised pretty big pre-flop. I guess I would bet pretty big on the flop. I mean, I would put in like 75% pot here.
Oh, really? Okay, so you'd go like 3,500 or something.
Yeah, because I think he can't fold any ace, and he can't fold a flush draw, and he can't fold Queen Jack. So we have a lot of hands. We have a lot of value targets, to use one of my favorite Andrew Brokus terms.
Yeah.
So we value targeting a lot of hands, and it really doesn't matter what you bet. All of those hands are going to call you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think in the moment, and I put it in my notes, was I put more of the draws into his range. So I put more of the Jack nines. I put more of the, and like the middling cards, like Jack 10 for second pair, maybe something like 8-9 that's got bottom pair and the backdoor straight draw. And then I also put the aces and stuff too. But you're right, because I'm going under the gun with a weaker ace. He's calling there with ace 10, ace jack, ace queen, possibly 3-betting with ace king, but he could call with those too. And he'll call a bigger bet just as he will a smaller one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see anybody in a $300 tournament folding any ace that they call pre-flop. Say he has ace jack, and you say he might have 3-bet ace king, but with no reads. I think a lot of $300 poker players, tournament players, will just call and see a flop with ace king.
Yeah, and then play fit or fold.
Yeah, and I think as you go a little bit higher stakes, generally you might see a little bit more 3-betting. But I think the under the gun raise gets a lot more respect than it should nowadays. And I think they'd just be afraid that you have a monster. So I'm just going to call. I can't fold ace king because it's too strong a hand. So I'm just going to call with it and see if I can hit a really good flop. And now if he does have ace king or ace queen, now here comes an ace on the flop. It doesn't much matter if you bet a third of the pot or a full pot. Yeah. You're going to get action either way. So, yeah, but I don't think it's right. Well, I shouldn't say I don't think it's right. I wouldn't give him as many jack nines and 9-7s and those kind of hands because, again, I think that not having a read on my opponent, I would assume that he gives the under the gun opening raise, especially 3x, a lot more respect, and he doesn't want to get involved with another large stack with those kind of holdings. Okay,
even on the button.
Yeah, even on the button, because you didn't raise from the hijack. I mean, you raised under the gun.
Yeah. Okay.
So
good point. Okay. Well, I wish I had Clayton sitting on my shoulder when I did this one. Into 4,500 with top and bottom pair. I bet 2K into 4,500. He thinks for about 2 seconds and then calls.
Yeah, and he's correct to call with a huge chunk of his range.
Yeah.
Your bet is so small that I would probably call you with king queen just for a gut shot.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And you're happy to get those calls because you probably have the best hand right now. It's very unlikely that ace 8 is no good.
Yeah.
So you're happy to get that call, but I think in the long run, you make more money in these spots by betting a larger amount just because you're going to get the same calls. Like you said, there are some hands that will fold for a bigger bet than this, right? But that's a pretty small group. Like the 8, what did you say? Like 8-7,
8-9, Jack 10.
8-9, Jack 10. Yeah, but how many 8-9s does he have when we know where 2 of the 8s are, right?
Good point. Yeah.
But Jack 10, I mean, nobody ever folds Jack 10 pre-flop. Everybody loves Jack 10.
Yeah, it's my favorite hand.
Yeah, everybody loves Jack 10. Suited or not, they love it because, when you make. And one reason for that, in case anyone doesn't know, is that anytime you make a straight and you have Jack 10, you have the nut straight. So
that's why I love it so much.
Yeah, it's a good hand because especially if you can get somebody else to make a worse straight against your Jack 10, it's a beautiful thing. That said, I think Jack 10 is certainly in our opponent's range and is an example of one hand that would fold to a larger bet. Just say, you know what, I called pre-flop to see a flop, and this flop, it hit me a little bit, but I don't have any diamonds. I just have middle pair with a jack kicker, and this guy is betting big again after he bet big pre-flop. I'm just going to fold my Jack 10 and see what happens later, especially because I just joined this table. I don't really know how aggressive this Steve guy is. So you put all that together, and yeah, like one advantage of this bet is that you do keep in a few hands like Jack 10 and the gut shots.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
okay. But that's a smaller part of his range than an ace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, man, we really value targeting the ace and the queen jack here.
Yeah, mostly. And the flush draws.
Yeah, the flush draws, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. He calls. So again, we've got ace 8 of hearts. The flop was ace 10 8 with 2 diamonds. And with 8,500 in the pot, we go to the turn, and the turn is the 6 of clubs. So we have ace 10 8 6 now. And the action's on us. We 2 clubs.
So the first thing I think of is, so now we have 2 possible flush draws, right? Diamonds and clubs. The first thing I think of is that this 6 of clubs is a very good card for us. If my opponent has an ace, he's likely to see that card as a blank.
Yeah.
The only hand that gets there is the unlikely 9-7.
Mm-hmm.
So all in all, I like the card. I like the board. I think we're in good shape generally. And I think that we basically priced our opponent in, say he has a flush draw or some other hand with decent equity on the flop. Our small flop bet price him in, especially if he feels like he has the implied odds to see the turn and river. So given that, we need to now deny him those odds
and bet big
on the turn and bet big here. Yeah. I think it's a good spot for like a 3/4. Yeah, probably like 2/3 to 3/4 of the pot, or maybe even a little bigger than that. Especially because a lot of players will call with any flush draw, even if you overbet the pot.
Yeah.
I don't know this guy personally, but just kind of treating him as like the average 30-year-old overweight guy in the field of players at Planet Hollywood in a $300 buy-in. I think you can probably get a lot of value from from all the flush draws.
Yeah.
And you could probably even get called again by an ace queen. You can probably get some good action from those hands as well. They don't like it when you bet big. They're not happy, but they're also not folding.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think so too. As I was running through this, I kind of wondered what the hell I was thinking in this spot, but into 8,500, what's your bet sizing? Like 65, 7K or something?
Yeah, I would probably put out like 68.
Okay. I like it. That's not what I did. But into 85, I bet 35. And I don't know why I did that. I guess I felt maybe like I was kind of milking him, but yeah, running through what his range is right here, you articulated it very well. We need to bet bigger because the hands that we're targeting are going to call that big bet.
Yeah, and now to be clear, once I make those bets that deny my opponent the proper odds to call with a draw, I want him to call.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people miss that. Like they bet big to protect their hand, hoping their opponent folds. No, once you've protected your hand, you want your opponent to call because that's where the profit comes from.
Exactly. Yeah. You're 75% and he's only 25. You want him to put money in bad.
Even though you're about to lose this hand 1 time out of 4, you still want the action because that's gambling. That's gambling with an edge.
Yeah.
You want to take that spot and try to get him. I mean, I would bet the largest amount I think I can get him to call. And not knowing him, I don't want to overbet too much because I don't want to help him play well.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to lead him down the dark alley. Come with me. Come on this way. There's some good stuff over here.
Yeah, there's a dark alley with some homeless people behind a dumpster, and it smells like urine. But you have little rose petals just placed every 4 feet, and someone.
Yeah. Now, I mean, of course, we don't have the nuts either, so there is some chance that we're beat. But I think that he hasn't really woken. He hasn't shown us, at least, that he's that he's got something he's really proud of. I mean, he's played the whole hand passively so far.
Yeah.
So I think that we should, when we're value targeting, like I always think of it this way, Steve. I may have even said this on the podcast before, so if I have, forgive me. But when I'm bluffing, I'm trying to buy something, and whenever I'm trying to buy something at the poker table or away from it, I try to get the lowest price I can. So what's the smallest amount I can bet to get this bluff through is kind of my mentality generally. Now, of course, you have to mix it up so that your opponents can't figure out what you're doing. But, if, from a bird's eye view, a macro view, if you will, that's what you're trying to do when you're bluffing. Opposite of that, when you're value betting, you're trying to sell something. So the way I look at it is, what is the highest price I can get for what I'm trying to sell, which is the dream of hitting your flush and getting paid. So that's what I'm selling. It's like, if you think it's worth it to put in 7,000 right now to see if you can hit your magic diamond on the river, then here you are. I have this beautiful river card for sale. It costs you 7,000 tournament chips. Do you want to buy it?
Yeah.
And I try to get the largest amount that I can. And I think when you just kind of default to these smaller bets, you might get a little bit more action from certain fringe hands that might have folded to my larger bets. But typically when I'm playing in a smaller stakes tournament like that, I don't think in those terms. I think that the biggest mistake my opponents typically make is that they call too much. So let's make them make a bigger mistake by not only calling too often, but by calling a larger amount more often as well.
Yeah. I like it. Okay. I bet 3,500 into 85 with with 2 pair and button min raises.
Okay.
7K.
Yeah. Now, if you wanted to fold every time you got min raised on the turn in a $300 tournament, I have no problem with that. Like, if you did that for the rest of your life, I think you end up making money in the long run, because let's look at what his possible range could even be. It would be very creative for him to make this bet with like a flush draw.
Right.
He's never doing this with 1 pair, like ace queen. It's just not. I should never say never, right? Never say never. It's unlikely that our opponent has a draw or 1 pair. So that means most of his range is going to be sets and straights.
Yeah.
Especially with the min raise.
Right.
Yeah, a big semi bluff with like a flush draw, straight draw, combo draw kind of thing here. Okay. Like, I could see it, but not a min raise. The problem is he's giving me a really good price, and he might just do this with a worse 2 pair. So that's the problem I'm having. He could have ace 6.
Yeah.
And I think that being priced in like this, I have to call and then check the river.
Okay. Yeah, I put the brakes on as well. And this whole time I thought I was trying to just squeak a little bit of value out of what he had. And then when he raised me like that, I thought, man, it's almost easier if he raises to like 14K and then I could just shove,
Yeah. Which I think would be a big mistake, by the way. I think that.
Okay.
Yeah, because I just think that in this type of tournament, especially live at Planet Hollywood, it's just, we're no good most of the time.
Okay.
But the problem is the min raise prices me in for that once in a while that ace 8 is good. I need to call for that every so often, because I mean, that's just giving you really good pot odds.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I flick in a call So the pot now is 22K. We've got 26 behind. So basically a 1-to-1 stack to pot. And with ace 8 of hearts, the board is ace of diamonds, 10 of clubs, 8 of diamonds. The turn was the 6 of clubs, and the river is the 10 of hearts. So the flush misses. The final board is ace 10 10 8 6.
And this is a great card for me because I don't have to lose any more chips.
Okay, we're on the same boat then.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a pretty clear check fold unless he bets a tiny amount.
Okay.
Yeah, we now have been counterfeited, right? There are two tens out there. So, I mean, yeah, I have nothing. Like there are so few bluffs in that min raise range on the turn.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I think he's usually going to show up with a full house here. Okay.
Yeah. I thought so. I thought at minimum he's got ace king, right?
Yeah. I just don't think he's going to. I don't think he ever min raises the turn with ace king. I just don't think that.
He's probably doing that on the flop, right?
I think he might do it on the flop. Yeah. Okay. Especially when you bet so small on the flop. I think that was his spot to take his ace king and go with it. Yeah.
But or if on the turn he's got ace king, he's probably just calling, right?
Yeah. I think, you've bet twice, so he's just going to call. I mean, his whole reason for not re-raising with ace king pre-flop was that he was concerned you have a monster. That's why they don't 3-bet the ace king in the first place, is because you're raising under the gun and they're scared of monsters under the bed. And now they're not going to suddenly be emboldened to start raising with just one pair, even if it is with the best kicker. So I just don't think they do that very often.
Okay. All right. I check, and then into 22K he bets 16, and then I quickly fold.
Yeah, that's an easy fold.
Yeah, I felt like I went wrong somewhere in this hand, and after talking with you, I'm pretty sure I nailed every single street wrong, which is rare, but I happened to do it. I pulled it off. I like the thing about limping under the gun, though, with that ace 8, because you're kind of right. By raising there with that hand, even at a passive table, you're only getting action from better aces. You're folding out the ones that are worse than yours, and the ones that are better than yours, you're calling.
Yeah, I mean, some players would call with like a suited ace 3 or ace 5. People they kind of overvalue having a wheel draw possible. You know, I mean, how often do you win with a wheel anyway? Like, that doesn't really happen that much, but a lot of players really like having those kind of wheel aces, suited aces, like ace 4 of hearts, like hands like that. So, you might get a few worse aces to call, but generally, you're not really getting a lot of action from worse when you raise.
Yeah. And then on the flop, that's a fist pump, bet bigger, and then on the turn, bet big as well. And if you get raised on the turn at that point, if we play it like you talked about, then you're probably never good.
Yeah. So and like I said, like, we shouldn't say never. But let's suppose that our opponent in this hand was holding queen jack of diamonds the whole time. Okay. So that means I not only flopped a double gut shot, but I also flopped a flush draw.
Yeah.
And my hand is so strong, and there's so many turn cards I'm going to love, that I'm just going to flat this little flop bet. He bets 2,000. I'm just going to call and then raise whatever the turn is. All right. So even if he did that, I still like the way you fold it, because that's such a small part of.
That's one combo.
Yeah, it's like one combo, and it's got to be such a specific combo. But even with that hand, I don't think most players would min raise the turn. The min raise on the turn is just in a big buy-in tournament. It's much harder to pinpoint what that min raise means. In this small buy-in tournament, I think it's always value.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say never or always, but it's practically always value.
Almost always, yeah.
Yeah. So if once in a while that we got bluffed here, and we ended up folding our ace with no kicker on the river, good for you, dude. You outplayed me in that hand, and you are supposed to get bluffed sometimes.
Yeah.
If you never get bluffed, you are calling too often.
You are a calling station. Stop.
Yeah, get bluffed more. My best advice for people who never get bluffed is to try to get bluffed more. It just, if you told me this was a hand from the main event and your opponent was Jason Kuhn or something, you're like, but it all goes back to, let's just talk about why are we in this pot in the first place? I just don't. I'm still on team fold. And, I think players who have listened to me talk hands a lot will be surprised at how tight I play under the gun and in early position. Even at an 8-handed table, I just don't open that many hands, especially easily dominated hands.
Yeah.
Especially when there is one or more opponent at my table who recently joined my table and has a stack, and I don't know how he plays. Like, I just don't think there's any reason to force the issue with this hand in the first place. So I probably would have just folded it pre-flop and then seen the flop and thought, I wonder if I could have won a big pot if I had played this hand, because there's 2 pair now. Then seen the river and said, all right, well, I'm glad I didn't play that hand after all.
I would rather after we analyze this, and I'd like to think I'm 4 months or 5 months better at poker than I was when I played this. I would rather raise here with like 8-9 of hearts than I would with ace-8.
Yeah, and I think a lot of players take too many of those kind of hands too. I mean, if we go back to my macro view, right? If we could like just take a bird's eye view from another planet at all of your play, generally speaking, you should be playing far fewer hands from early position than you are from late position.
Yeah.
So if you play every 9-8 suited and every ace-8 suited and every 8-7 suited under the gun, you're just playing way too many hands from under the gun. Like you said earlier, it was a passive table. You felt like you had a good sense of your opponents. You felt like they were passive and that you could probably take a few more liberties. But I think as soon as you start putting in too many hands, then you're basically not playing better than they are anymore.
Yeah, I'm giving away that edge by playing weaker hands than I should.
Yeah, and if you re-examine this whole hand and just trade places with your opponent, right? So suppose this player opened under the gun and you have the ace-8 of hearts on the button and you play the hand again with the same flop and the same turn, like you are going to win this pot more often in position than you would from out of position.
Yeah.
So, just too much can go wrong. I mean, even at a passive table, they pick up monsters sometimes. So you raise under the gun, 8-handed, and then the guy in third position calls you, and then the button 3 bets. Now what do I want to play a huge pot with ace-8 of hearts, and I'll be first to act on all streets? Yeah. Or do I just want to fold knowing that my hand probably has some equity against everybody, especially being suited? It's just too many things. Like I said, too many things can go wrong. So for me, I just avoid those pitfalls. And my VPIP, if you will, from early position is probably substantially lower than the average players. And by the same token, my VPIP in late position, I'm almost sure, is way higher than the average players.
Yeah. Right on. Cool. Well, thank you, Clayton. If guys want to come out and see your show, it's a Broadway Comedy Club in New York. You guys can go to headsuppoker.poker, click on the Circle of Trust, and Clayton Fletcher has earned himself a spot right in there. He's got his Twitter handle. Yes. Welcome to the club, Clayton. He's got his Twitter there, got his website. You guys can find him there. And start tuning into the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. You're not going to have to check it twice a year anymore. It's coming up regularly, which is nice. If you guys decide to join TPE, use the code HUP month, HUP quarter, or HUP year. That'll score yourself a little discount. You can watch all the videos that Clayton and I watch and tune into the show. It's really cool, and I'm glad you're doing it, Clayton. And I wish you the best, man. If you ever need a guest on the show, I'm here.
I appreciate it so much, Steve. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, you have a great weekend, my friend, and thank you for tuning in. Here is your weekly motivational speech.
Human beings absolutely follow through on who they believe they are. If you said to me, well, I'm really going to work hard to stop smoking, but I've been a smoker my whole life and I am a smoker. I know your days are numbered. You're going to be back smoking cigarettes again, because we all act consistent with who we believe we are. I tell people the strongest force in the whole human personality is this need to stay consistent with how we define ourselves. If you define yourself as somebody who is really conservative, you're not going to be crazy and act nuts unless you're really drunk or something, and then you can say it's the alcohol, when it's really just you finally getting permission to be yourself. The alcohol is your excuse. If you're a really crazy person, you act crazy, outrageous, playful. You don't act conservative because that's not who you are. Very often people say, well, I can't do that. I'm not that kind of person. And I always say to people, really, when did you define yourself? I mean, really, how many years ago did you come up with what you could and couldn't do in your life? How many years ago? Most people, if they really look at how they're living their life today, it's based on a set of standards, a set of beliefs that they made choices about 10, 20, 30 or more years ago. I mean, very often we made decisions in our youth or very young about what to believe, about what we were capable of, about who we are as a person, and that becomes the glass ceiling, if you will, that controls us. There's a corny metaphor, but it's true. I remember one time I was with my family at the circus, and there was a person there and they had this big giant elephant, and you look at this elephant and they take this little rope, put it around the elephant's neck, and they drive this stake into the ground. And I mean, you look at this and you know that elephant could rip down the entire tent with almost no effort, and yet the elephant doesn't struggle, doesn't try. Why? Because the elephant's conditioned. And they take that elephant and condition the elephant when it's a baby elephant. That's how they train him. When it's a little baby elephant and it doesn't have the power yet, they put a big rope around it and they drive this huge stake in the ground, and the elephant fights and fights and fights. And one day, finally, that elephant decides, I'm not capable of pulling this out. And once that becomes the definition of an identity of anyone, an elephant in this case, they don't even try anymore. It's just who I am, that's how it is, that's just the way it is in my life. I'd like to ask you to take a look at any place you've got a limitation and ask yourself, when did I decide to accept that limitation? And you may not even see it as a limitation. You might see it as just that's who I am. But so often in our lives, we've adapted to be a certain way so that we don't fail or so that people will like us or respect us, but it's not necessarily who we are. Joy comes when you're spontaneous. It's really hard to be truly happy when you're not being yourself. And most of us have no clue who we are. And so a big part of my work, if you've ever been to an event, you know, is to get people to do things spontaneously without thinking, because that's when the real you shows up. That's when the energy comes alive. And when you do that, when you start to connect to your true nature, suddenly there's energy available for you to set a higher standard for what you want in your life.